Good afternoon. My name is Joseph Lloyd and I source cars for people on a professional basis. Although most of the cars I source are between £1,000 and £5,000, very often I've been asked to show something a little bit cheaper on the channel, and so I came up with No Budget Reviews, the series where we look at cars that you can buy in good condition with an MOT for under £1,000 and you can enjoy driving. We don't film this in an expensive manner, we don't use separate microphones, we don't use fluid head tripods, we don't even use a DSLR, but we do have a lot of fun. Lloyd Vehicle Consulting t-shirts, mugs and stickers are now available. Please click on the Google link in the description below to purchase your very own. It's very strange to sort of go back sometimes and have some nostalgia for something that happened over 20 years ago, but for many of us, I think who passed our tests around the late 1990s and into the early 2000s, a Vauxhall Corsa B was the car that we would have taken lessons in. Certainly for me, I learnt in a Corsa B. It was a 94 1.4 SI GLS. The reason I say SI is because often with the Corsas you have to know what the little things here mean. This particular I on here means that this is the eDrive Merit model. It's got slightly different gearing and some other things that are different about the standard one. But you just don't see many of these early Corsa Bs around anymore, particularly not a base model like this. And I'm sure many of you think that this is the most appealing Corsa B of all, and I understand that. It came out in about 1993, and it looked very, very different from a Nova that it was based on. Now, there are many elements that are in common, not so much the interior or the exterior, but the engines in particular were shared with the late Novas. If you're from many other places in the world, then you wouldn't call it the Nova anyway, you'd call it the Corsa A. So we call it the Corsa B because it differentiated from the earlier model, and then we're now on the Corsa F actually. And I've driven quite a few other Corsas actually on my channel. I've driven a Corsa C, I've driven two Corsa Fs, the electric one and the standard one, and a Corsa D, although we can't talk about the Corsa D, I'm afraid, viewers. I think the styling has aged actually remarkably well, particularly in this base model with these, you know, black plastic bumpers and the early front end. I think this is actually quite a nice piece of design. We are still within no budget reviews territory for the Corsa B at the moment. There might be a time when we're not, but you just don't see so many of them anymore, not of them are in poor condition. This one has done 60,000 miles and it's in exceptional condition. I think even that these number plates are original dealer plates from the period. So when this car came out in early 1995, this particular car registered early 95, the sort of rivals to this would have been things like the brand new Fiesta Mark IV, the Rover 100 that has just come out as well, and you know, this was still quite a competitive car. The Nissan Micra with K11 was probably the most competitive one to it, and also the one most beloved of driving schools. Certainly these door handles straight away are off a lot of other Vauxhall cars of the period, and you can look around and see various other design elements that are shared with other cars. This upholstery is very much of the period. It actually doesn't look too bad, and the interior of this car is in exceptional condition. It's absolutely amazing, really. These controls will be familiar to people who actually drove a first generation Vauxhall Agila or second generation Suzuki Wagon R, because they're the same heater knobs. This is a base model car, and so the display that will be up here on something like a GLS is not here. It's just completely absent, which is really, really strange. we do have internally adjustable mirrors, and this car's got a rear wiper, which feels a bit decadent, but we've got no rev counter, got no sunroof, no electric windows, no air conditioning, and a black plastic steering wheel with 2 spokes and no airbag. So we are in poverty spec land, but at least we've got a 5-speed gearbox. It wasn't necessarily even like a guarantee when this car was new. A lot of smaller cars would have actually come with a 4-speed box. Radio in this is an aftermarket one. It doesn't really matter because you haven't got the display up here anyway, so it doesn't matter. It would have come with tape deck originally, of course. These stalks, the indicator and wiper stalks, are actually the same use for Lloyd DSLRs, which is crazy. If this car had electric mirrors, I'm sure we'd be seeing that standard Opel Vauxhall switch that was used for I don't know how long, probably about there. But of course we haven't got that, so you know we can't compare it. Door cards are actually quite nice. They're nicer than some later cars. You've got fabric all the way on most of the door card, and this being a 3-door, they're really, really long actually. I will have a look in the glove box, and we might get the secret mission documents out in a second. Although I think we've got something rather interesting here. Oh yes, please. Cult TV legends, the prisoner, the persuader, the saint and danger man. It's very appropriate because we're actually in a location here in Bedfordshire, which was used in an episode of The Avengers in 1966 called The See-Through Man. This particular corner here is where Dinah Rigg forced a Jaguar Mark II off the road. So yes, we are very much within that part of the world, which makes me very happy. Right, let me get my secret mission documents out and see if we can get them in the glove box. One thing I do notice about the interior of this car is that it feels much higher quality than a lot of the other cars would have been at the time. It's maybe on a par with the Mark IV Fiesta and the K11 Micra, maybe slightly nicer than those, but certainly in comparison to like a Metro or Citroen AX, it feels a little bit nicer than those. Not that I don't like a AX or a Metro, of course. So yes, viewers, yes, put that in there. Fantastic. That's made me very happy. Gearbox actually in this feels much better than the one that I learnt to try then. I'm sure that I've done higher mileage than this. But it's actually, you know, where the gearboxes and Vauxhalls were a little bit sloppy at the time, this feels quite tight, which is good. I've actually got some proper vents in here. We would have air conditioning on higher trimmed, of course. This is the base model, so we don't get anything like that. Has light switches in a nice, safe place. Just very kind of what would have been considered modern in 1993 when this car came out, and easy to use and no fuss really. And of course it has the classic thing. Just press here. What's it? Can't remember if you would press it in or something, and you pull it out, and that sort of does different things to the interior. Like, no, why is it not doing that? Maybe I haven't done something right. It's something to do with that. It leaves the interior light on. Something you sort of learn in you know, these courses after a while. It's so funny with these indicator stalks that are just used on all these different cars. Right, anyway, that's enough of me talking about random stuff. Let's get into the back. Right, viewers, here we go. Looks pretty easy. That seat didn't actually move though, so maybe not the best, but we'll give it a try. Headroom looks quite good in here. Look at that, that's pretty good if I just sit up. Oh wow, feet go underneath here. My head's not touching the roof. It's not too far off, but it's not touching. Compared with the Nova that this replaced, it's a revelation. There's quite a lot of space in here. I mean, I'm only 5'11", I'm not the tallest person, but it feels really good. No ashtrays or anything in the back of here, apart from maybe down there. Yes, it's pretty good. We've got 2 3-point belts and a lap belt down there. No split folding seat because this is a base model, but you could get that on higher trims. That's not bad actually. It feels very airy actually in here with these large windows and this light headlining. It feels pretty good. Right, I think it's time to have a look at the engine. So there we are, viewers. This is the pre-Ecotec Family 1 engine. in this case developing 45 horsepower. And yeah, you can see the oil filters just there. Working on this looks like an absolute doddle. The gearbox is just down there. No plastic covers in here. I think it's only single point fuel injection in this. Obviously it is a car with a cap because it's after January 1993. So a lot of manufacturers before then changed from the carbs to fuel injection, in this case single point fuel injection, and had to have a cap. But yeah, there's a timing belt in here, so make sure if you're buying one of these cars, most of them do have family 1 engines, although the later 1 litre 1.2 is a family 0 with a timing belt or a timing chain. So just make sure if you're buying a Corsa B, if it's a petrol one, because we don't talk about diesels on the channel, that majority of them will have a timing belt. But you know, they are actually pretty good engines. They are quite reliable, these, as long as you look after them. Right, one thing I must do before we go out for a drive is to take a look in the boot. So, just open up the boot. I think it's about 250 litres actually. For a car of its time, it's pretty versatile. There's not much wheel arch intrusion in here at all. The side here we'll probably find kind of, it's hard to do rear lights and things like that, so we'll leave that alone. Let's lift up the carpet. Actually, that looks like it's going to be a little bit of a pain doing that, so we won't do that, but the spare wall will be underneath here. We've got a penguin in here. Maybe he'll explode if he sits on top of the television or something like that, so we'll leave him in there. But yeah, big lip to get stuff in, but to be honest, that's the same even now with cars of this size. It's probably about the same space in here. Yeah, about 250 litres, about the same as a Volkswagen Up, I should think. Which, yeah, for a small car in 1993 when they came out, was pretty good. Made in Spain, yes, this is where Corsas for our market were actually made generally, although all sorts of countries actually had these. And we've even got a very handy thing here to pull and close the boot if you're not particularly tall. There we go, right. Now it's time to go out for a little spin. Oh my goodness, that would be the boot light if you actually paid more money for the next model up. Sorry about that, Mr. Penguin. It's really weird to be driving along in this car, having taken lessons in one of these many years ago. Obviously the one that I drove was a 1.4 with 82 horsepower and it had a few more refinements than this, but it feels very similar. This steering wheel is almost the same, and also it doesn't have a rev counter. Now the base engine in one of these was exactly the same engine as in this car. It's a 1.2 family 1 engine with 45 horsepower. For some reason it doesn't actually feel out of its depth too much. We just come off a dual carriageway and actually it feels alright. It must be something to do with the extra sort of tall gearing that's in this eDrive model. But sort of pottering around, it's actually okay. When the Corsa B was new in 1993, the other engines available were a 1.4 engine with 60 horsepower called the high torque engine. There was also an 82 horsepower version of that called the SI version, and at the back of the car you'd see SI badges. Whatever trim level you had, you'd see just that SI badge on it. So open that window a little bit with the handle. The top model petrol Corsa engine at launch was for the GSI model. That was 1.6, again a family 1 engine with 110 horsepower. Later on they started to change the models a bit. The first to go was the GSI. For some reason it wasn't very popular and it was changed for a car called the Sport, but was available with two different engines. A 1.4 with 88 horsepower that came in around, I think it was early 95. They changed the two other 1.4s to one of those. And then a 1.6 was a 16 valve unit, which I think was one of the first Ecotec engines, and that developed 105 horsepower. In 1997 they started to change the Corsa B and they introduced a facelift for it. One of the things they did was change the sort of bottom engines in the range for some others, the new Family Zero units, and that was a 1 litre 3-cylinder. That generated, I think, about 55 horsepower. The 1.2 version of that was a 4-cylinder, that was 64 horsepower, I believe. There are also some diesels available, but as usual, due to controversial government legislation and many other reasons, we don't talk about diesels on this channel. What we do talk about is the ride of this car, which is actually much better than I imagined. We're going through a little village in Bedfordshire at the moment, actually quite close to where they still build Vauxhall vans, and the ride is better than I remember, possibly because the car I was driving at the time was a late 94 and it was in 2000. The ride obviously was a bit worse because of old springs, but this, despite the car dating from about the same time, it's actually an early 95, this one, it feels absolutely fine. It feels ideal for somebody who wants to learn to drive, even without power steering, even without a rev counter, even with 45 horsepower. It actually feels very nippy and easy. The visibility in this car is remarkably good. I'm actually really surprised how good it is. The engine is really smooth. Family 1 unit was used actually until I think it was either 2015 or 2017 in all sorts of General Motors products, and it had been launched around 1980 with the Mark 1 Astra. And this little engine, it's also, you know, was used in the Nova or the Corsa A if you're not from the United Kingdom. It's actually very willing. It's surprisingly so. I thought it was going to be terrible, but it's actually okay. I'm actually pleasantly surprised with this way this car drives. It's not as good to drive as a Mark 4 Fiesta, of course it isn't, but it's actually doing pretty well. I'm really impressed just how easy it is to place the car, the visibility of it, and the fact it actually feels very refined. I'm very fond of things like Metros and, you know, Mark 3 Fiestas. I do like them, but this just feels a little bit more refined, a little bit more advanced, and also the styling of this car is a lot more contemporary, of course. Let's now look at some trim levels for the Corsa B. This is the Merit, which is the base model, although this is the eDrive version with the different gearing and I think a couple of other changes. So we have the Sting, the Trip, the Envoy, the Club, the LS, the GLS, the SRI, the SXI, the Sport, the GSI, the CDX, the Expression, the Breeze, the .com, which I think was one of the first manufacturer schemes to actually order a car on the internet and have it arrive. Vegas, the Premier. There's actually of course a Premier in One Foot in the Grave in one episode. The Swing, the Twist, the Arizona, and the Spin. So traditionally, like so many other Vauxhalls, a lot of trim levels through the Corsa B's life from 93 to 2000 in this country. However, the car actually continued in production in some parts of the world until about 2017, I believe. And some of the model names that the car had were the Chevrolet Chevy, the Chevrolet Corsa, the Buick Sail, that was a slightly adapted Corsa B, the Holden Barina, which is in Australia, and then the Opel Vita in Japan. There are many others as well. The car was built in a lot of places, or the variations on this car, but in other places. There was an estate version of this car in some countries, there was a saloon version in other places, and the ones I know about are India, Thailand, Spain, like this car, this is built in Spain, Germany, Colombia, Mexico, Argentina, Brazil, Venezuela, Egypt, South Africa, China and Ecuador. Thoroughly global car, and I think that's the way General Motors wanted it. Certainly a very successful model for them. So, viewers, with your hard-earned budget of up to £1,000, is the Vauxhall Corsa B something that you should consider? Well, obviously there are issues with these cars, with rust. I mean, just like the old Novas, and a Ford Fiesta Mark IV does drive a little bit better than this. It has to be said, and possibly the Metro's a little bit more characterful, but I don't see why not. These cars are going to be disappearing quite fast soon because they're still relatively low value. This car is worth a bit more than no budget of use money because of the condition of it. But probably the best thing to do if you really want one of these is to get one of these whilst you can, because they're not going to be this cheap for long. Anyway, thank you ever so much indeed for watching this episode of No Budget Reviews. Thank you to Les for allowing me to drive this. And we'll see you again for more inexpensive motoring.